Thank you. And now it's my honor to introduce Dr. Mark Agars. So he is a director of a professor of psychology. Thank you so much, as well as the director of the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations here at Cal State University, San Bernardino. He works to develop and facilitate partnerships that connect Cal State University with our local community. And he looks to form collaborations that serve the needs of children and families. His own professional scholarship explores the work-family interface with a specific focus on how family and work demands impact individuals and familial health and well-being, especially among low-wage, part-time, and shift workers. Dr. Agars also hosts a weekly personal and professional growth podcast called Life in the Balance on Coyote Radio. It's my honor to bring up Dr. Agars to make a few comments this morning.
I feel like I should be doing karaoke instead. This is good. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, James. On behalf of the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations and all of CSUSB, I welcome everyone to today's event. I am grateful to James and to Mike and to everyone at CCRC for choosing to host this forum here on our San Bernardino campus. I don't know if you had a chance driving in to look, but it's beautiful today, right? And the snow on the tops of the mountains and the green on the hills. This is truly a special place, and this is a particularly special time of year. So my thanks to you all for hosting it here today. I am very grateful for our partnership, and I really recognize the importance of collaboration and partnership between institutions of higher education, like CSUSB, and community agencies, as these are vital to the health and well-being of our community, especially the needs of our youngest learners. As an institution of higher ed, we at CSUSB are committed to serving the needs of children and families in our region, and we do this through our undergraduate and graduate programs in our spectacular new child development department. She cannot be here today, but that is chaired by someone many of you have probably know and have worked with, Dr. Amanda Wilcox Herzog. And their department truly serves as a premier training ground for students who seek careers or simply advanced education related to working with children and families. And as I'm sure many of you know, the vast majority of our graduates, including in those programs, stay here in the Inland Region and work for agencies like yours and others serving our children and our families. We also conduct research, provide training and services through programs that exist primarily in partnership with community agencies, many of which are represented here today, with whom we share a commitment to serving young children. This is my 11th year as director of the ICDFR, which is way too long, but that's okay. But I just want to say, during that time, I think the thing that I am most proud of, and this is born of the collective efforts of the faculty and students and project personnel who are the core of these programs, but what I'm most proud of are the wonderful partnerships and friendships that have developed over time with so many of you. I believe, as I know many of you do, that our ability to make a difference in the lives of young children requires collective effort. That the impact that each of our agencies have, that each of us as individuals working in this space might have, is greater when we are working together. And I am glad to be doing that with all of you. So again, my thanks to CCRC. Today is going to be a great event. My thanks and welcome to each of you. Enjoy today.
Thank you, Mark. It's now my honor to introduce you to our Assembly Majority Leader Emerita, Eloise Gomez-Reyes. They gave me a script to read here, but I think I know quite a bit of this by heart. But the Assembly member was first elected to represent District 47 back in 2016. Recently, we've had shifts in the district boundaries. She's now the Assembly member over District 50. which is slightly different. So she's brought in a few new cities into her district. In 2020, she was appointed as the Assembly Majority Leader and became the first Latina to serve in that capacity in the Assembly. Currently, she serves on Speaker Robert Rivas's leadership team. She is the Assistant Majority Whip, and she serves on Environmental Safety and Toxic Material Committee, Housing and Development Committee, Public Safety Committee, Judiciary Committee, Utilities and Energies Committees, and Legislative Ethics Committee. So how you find time to be with us as much as you are, I don't know. And I will share, we just had her State of the District, or she just had her State of the District. Sometimes I think I'm part of her team. I say we, but it was her and her team's event. Where we really highlighted a lot of the wins in this current year. And one of the most impactful, especially for CCRC and many of the children, families, and providers we represent, was the success around reimbursement rates and family fees, where she was a key part of bringing in and that endeavor and her leadership in that work brought nearly $3 billion to our field. So we're so thankful for that. It's my honor to bring up the Assembly woman and have her give a few remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. This is such a great group to be with. When we're talking about the children, the youngest of our children, you all are the leaders. You all are, as it says, the champions. You're the champions. You're the most important people. When we want to know something important, we go to you. As we were walking in with Dr. Sharina Betters, and we were saying, we need to get the code so we can drive in, because we're always parking so far away. But this is so important to have you all together. Here at Cal State San Bernardino, my husband Frank, who is a trustee for the Community College District, is a graduate, got his bachelor's and master's here, but he always refers to Cal State San Bernardino as the Harvard of the West. That's right. Well, my great friends that I've worked with when I was up in Sacramento, the speaker, one of the first committees he put me on was the Speaker's Blue Ribbon Commission on Early Childhood Education. I learned so much, and some of the great experts like Donna, like Michael, like James, like Karen, so many who provided so much information that is now part of that master plan up in Sacramento. So I thank you all for all of your input on that. I'm so proud to be here with all of you, with CCRC. CCRC and I have been partners on some of the most important legislation. James just mentioned something that was so key. It was a bill that I introduced along with my colleague, Senator Monique Limon. She had SB 380, I had AB 596, and this was to provide a better way to fund our child care providers, and also to waive our family fees. If we have families have subsidized child care, why are we having them pay family fees? During COVID, we were able to have it waived successfully, and we kept asking for extensions and extensions. Finally, it's part of the plan now. And as was mentioned, yes. The bills that we introduced, because of all the hearings, and so many of you were present with us, it prioritized the budget along with many of our other colleagues. The Women's Caucus said this was a priority for them. Latino Caucus, the Black Caucus, the API Caucus, this was a priority. And nothing that is done in Sacramento is ever done by one person or two people. It is always, always a group effort. I thank my colleagues like Assemblymember James Ramos, State Senator Rosalicia Ochoa-Bogue, Assemblymember Carrillo, and so many others. I don't think I've ever been to an event where so many representatives of my colleagues are here. That's how important you all are. When I was speaking to a group up in Sacramento after this great budget win, there was a representative from Parent Voices, and she shared that she was in a group of 40 parents just a couple of months after that. And they had shared that collectively they had saved $77,000 in those family fees that they would have paid, but because they were waived, collectively they had saved $77,000. That is huge. And that's just from 40 of the parents. We heard testimony from parents who talked about the fact that they can now pay off debt. They can now go to school. They can now enroll their children in folklorico. The testimony was very moving. And to know that we played a role in this makes me very, very happy. What we did last year was a big win. It was a big win, and we all know what the budget looks like now. So now we have to make sure that the governor knows we made a promise and we got to keep the promise. That's right. And we had been hearing that they were going to claw back some of this, so we immediately, I told my team, I said, I want you not to call the governor's office. I want you to send an email, because I want an email in response so that we can have proof of what we're talking about. And we asked, are you taking away this money? Because they kept saying, no, we're not, no, we're not. We got it confirmed. No, that's not going to be taken off. We're not going to balance the budget on the backs of the parents or the children or the families, not this time. So we have two new bills. You know we always have to have another bill, right? And my dear friend Karen Scott from First Five had come up and talked about the need to put together a real plan for prenatal through 3 years. We talk about those children starting at 4 years that are going to early childhood. And I know I heard from my child care worker saying, you took away our 4-year-olds. Okay, that's a different story for another day. But our prenatal to 3, we need to be more intentional about how we're planning for them. And so we've introduced AB 2982. The name of the bill is the Bright Beginnings Act. And yes, and it establishes a prenatal to 3 work group to craft recommendations for a prenatal to 3 system policy agenda. Once we have the agenda, then we start introducing the bills that go along with that agenda, and I'm very excited about that. Another bill that I'm also partnering with CCRC on this year is AB 1930, and that's to address staffing shortages, especially in early learning and care programs. Right now there is a restriction on associate teacher permit renewals. After 10 years, you can't renew it. Whereas for everything else, you can renew it, but not for our for associate teacher permits. And there are some whose goal it is to be an associate teacher. They're not looking to do something else. And we're taking away some important staff members if we do that. So this particular bill is going to remove that restriction for our associate teacher permit renewals. Yes. So since I was elected, one of my priorities has been children, parents, and families. And if you look at my legislation since I was elected, I always carry at least one bill that deals with the issue, and I will continue to do that. Whether I'm in the Assembly or the Senate, wherever I am, our children need to be intentionally protected. We need to be intentional about everything that we do to protect them, to uplift our families, and to make sure that we provide the tools they need to take care of the children, and to protect, by extension, our early childhood educators. If we don't take care of them, who is going to teach our children? Who is going to teach our children? So you all have a wonderful conference. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I will continue to be your partner. Thank you.
Wow, I am Dr. LaWanda Wesley, the Director of Government Relations, and I have the esteemed pleasure of introducing you to our fearless leader, Dr. Mike Olenek. Dr. Mike Olenek, yes. has been the president and CEO for CCRC for 20 years. He oversees all programs, projects, and services provided to over 75,000 children and families each month in the service area spanning over 22,500 square miles. He is responsible for managing 1,200 staff and growing, and a $600 million budget and growing. For more than 3 decades, Dr. Olenek chaired numerous boards and committees at the county, state, and national levels. And again, it's my pleasure, Dr. Olenek, to serve with you, beside you, underneath you, all the things. So thank you for trusting me, and I also want to thank my direct supervisor, Donna Sneringer, for also trusting me, but thank you.
So Eloise Gomez-Reyes talked about the Blue Ribbon Commission, and I just wanted to make one comment about that. I was the one male voice on that Blue Ribbon Commission for several years that we toiled on it. And one of the pieces that I kept saying was, we need to make sure that the state in their departments makes their allocations based on where the kids are going to be, not where the kids have been. And the reason why the Inland Empire, I'm taking credit for the Inland Empire getting a whole lot more money in childcare than it used to get, because I kept saying, we got to make sure that we do this. We got to make sure that we do this. And that actually happened. Department of Ed at the time changed their allocation formulas, and the Inland Empire got a lot more money than it had been getting. So sometimes you just have to take credit for something, right? So, and I have to say that Eloise has been a great partner for us, so we appreciate it. Also would like to, you see all these people in the corners standing up? Those are all CCRC staff, all the people taking pictures and all that. So can we give them a round of applause? It takes a village to put one of these on. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Manuel Pastor, who's our keynote speaker today. He's the Distinguished Professor of Sociology and American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California, where he directs the USC Equity Research Institute. He's the Terpangian Chair in Civil Society and Social Change at USC and holds an economics PhD from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Dr. Pastor's research generally focuses on issues of economic, environmental, and social conditions facing low-income urban communities. Dr. Pastor did a presentation for us in Los Angeles in January talking about the out-migration and the baby bust that's happening in Los Angeles County. So we asked him to come back and talk about the baby boom and the out-migration or the in-migration to the Inland Empire. So without any further ado, Dr. Pastor.
The big sort of demographic story that most people are talking about is the transformation of the nation to becoming majority people of color by the year 2045. It is a sort of change that, of course, fills some Americans with a sense of dread about their America slipping away from them. It's something that fills some of us instead with great joy. For example, someone like me from Los Angeles, where we became majority people of color in 1988, all I can think is that for the rest of the United States, they will soon experience the joy of Korean taco trucks. And there can be little wrong with that. One of the interesting things to realize is that a lot of that demographic change between 2000 and 2050, United States, going from being about 69% non-Hispanic white to being about 48% non-Hispanic white, we already experienced that in California. And I'm gonna press this button again. Takes a little while. So what you can see is that from 1980 to 2000, we basically experienced the change the United States is going to experience between 2000 and 2050. California was America fast forward. And if you were around during that period, you'll remember that the 90s was a period of tremendous racial anxiety, the passage of legislation to remove undocumented from any kind of services, the elimination of bilingual education, the elimination of affirmative action, the overcriminalization of Black and brown youth. So that kind of tension racked California. But one of the things that you can see that's really interesting about California going forward is that the California of the future is actually pretty similar to the California of today. That is, that we're going to become a little bit more Latino, a little bit more Asian, but not a whole lot more. It's interesting because in the rest of the country, what they imagine is that all of that demographic change is going to occur in California, that somehow by the year 2050, California will become 150% Latino. There'll be sort of super Chicanos marching the earth, right? Declaring Aslan! La Reconquista, we're back. But you can see that it's slowing down. It's slowing down in particular in Los Angeles. I don't know whether this actually works or whether I should point it to God and hope for the best or... Okay, so this is Los Angeles. What you can see about Los Angeles is very little demographic change going forward. In fact, this is a great little demographic data point for you, because if you know demographic data points, you can be a big hit at cocktail parties. People will come up to you with little drinks with umbrellas saying, please share another one. The only large metropolitan area in the last 10 years that did not see an increase in the number of Hispanic children, Los Angeles. Because our Latinos are more US born. If they're immigrant, they've been here for a much longer time. So their family formation patterns are getting close to the US norm of barely replacing your family. And high housing prices are forcing young Latino families out into the Inland Empire. And that's what's in the next slide. This is the demographic change in the Inland Empire. And you can see that you are continuing to change going forward. That by the year 2060, the Inland Empire, Riverside and San Bernardino, will be 75% Latino. Everyone will say San Bernardino the right way. Riverside, perhaps not so accurately. But you can see that that's really the demography of the future. Now let's look at, next slide. What this shows you is the share of foreign born for the United States, the blue line, for California, the orange line, for Los Angeles, the gray line, the Inland Empire is the sort of yellow line. What you're going to notice is that your share of foreign born in 1980 was actually pretty low. But what's gone on is that it's increasingly, you're getting more and more immigrants who are moving here. What's interesting when you look at the data is it's not so much recent arrivals. That's not so much that the Inland Empire has become a point of entry. It's sort of the next step. That is for people who come to Los Angeles, maybe get a toehold and start to figure out where they're going next to be able to find someplace more affordable to raise children. That's what's going on in the Inland Empire. So what is your demography? Let's go to the next slide if we can. So what is driving our demographic change? If it's, which is really interesting, is it's the folks you work with, kids. So this is change in California by race and ethnicity between 2000 and 2021. State of California, what you'll notice is that the number of young whites in that period actually fell by about 1 million. Now, that does not mean that 1 million young white people died. We would have noticed that. There would have been a shortage of demand for avocado toast. So, and believe me, I have Latino kids and they'll like that too. I don't understand it, but they do. So, it means that there's more young whites becoming 19, 18, 19, and 20 than there are becoming 0, 1, and 2. So low birth rates. The number of young black folks has fallen as well. Some of that is black folks redesignating themselves as multiracial. In an earlier period, lots of young black folks were much more likely just to mark black. Now they're more likely to mark multiracial. But you can see that the big growth is in the Latino and Asian population. Next slide. So what is that? Next slide. What does that look like in the Inland Empire? Well, in the Inland Empire, generally demographically, usually my PowerPoints don't have a strobe effect, but this does add to that. We need one of those, dancing balls that turns around with lights. So this is the current demography. Let's move on. It's San Bernardino County, this county. It's a little bit more Latino, particularly US-born Latino. Next slide. So let's look at the child population and just go to the next slide. Perfect. For the Inland Empire. And this doesn't really work, so I'm just going to say next slide, and whoever is near a computer can be doing that. So you can see what's happened with your youth population. For your 0 to 5 population, your first 5 population, now about 63% of that population is Latino, only about 20% is white. You've had a pretty stable black young population and a growing Asian population. So that's the young population you're dealing with. Next slide. Now I want to talk a little bit about something people don't pay as much attention to, which is the undocumented population and how that impacts your kids. Like the rest of California, you have a significant undocumented population. What is unusual, and this was interesting discovering this in the data, is how settled your undocumented population is. This is for Los Angeles County. Move to the next slide. This is for the Inland Empire. 85% of your undocumented population has been in the country for more than a decade. They're undocumented Californians. They're deeply settled, woven into the fabric of communities, working at jobs, and as you'll see in a minute, raising families. Now, that's a much higher share than California as a whole, which is about 62% of undocumented have been here for longer than a decade. But again, it's because of the pattern that people arrive in different locations. They may arrive to go work in Imperial County and then move up here, or Central Valley and move here, or Los Angeles and move here, and they wind up raising children. Next slide. And what that means, if you move to the next slide, for some reason you're showing a lot of slides that are supposed to be hidden, is that if you look at the undocumented population in the Inland Empire, the undocumented population is about 226,000, but it is outnumbered by the US citizens who live with those undocumented residents. Mostly kids, but also aunts, uncles, other family members that they might have moved out with to buy a house, etc. There's also about 67,000 people with green cards who live with an undocumented family member. And by the way, that doesn't speak to if it's your cousin who's undocumented and you don't live with that person, that also feels like it's part of your family because it is, right? This is just people who live in the same households. And what that means, moving to the next slide, let's see, is in the Inland Empire, 13% of your first 0 to 5 population has at least one parent who's undocumented. Meaning kids who are worried about coming home and having a parent not be there because of immigration enforcement, kids who are insecure because of these conditions, parents who might be fearful of engaging with you all because of their status. Next slide. Next slide. We're going to keep going because for some reason a bunch of hidden slides are showing up on your. So next slide. So this is important. If you look at, this is the share of the 0 to 5 population, with the share of the population that's 0 to 5. And one of the things that you're going to notice that's a general trend in California is that the share of children is falling, low birth rates. There's also another reason for that, and it's the following. When people think of demographic change, what we're accustomed to thinking is about ethnic change, a state becoming more Latino, more Asian, what's happening with the way African Americans self-identify, et cetera. But demography is also about age. And one of the things people don't realize, in the past, we've often thought about an older, whiter generation and a younger generation that's more people of color. But here's a little secret about Black, Latino, and Asian people. Every year, we also get 1 year older. And what's going on is that the share of Californians who are above the age of 65 is going to go from about 11% in 2010 to nearly a quarter in 2060. And almost all of that is the growth in Latino and Asian, to some degree Black residents as well, who will be aging. Because the white aging population is generally going to be more stable. So what that means is the share of children is falling, and where are they going? Next slide. What this shows you is where the previous one was the share of the population that are children. This shows you of all the children, where are they living and projected to live. And one of the things you're going to notice where I live, Los Angeles, is the share of children in the state who live in Los Angeles is going to fall dramatically. That's also happening to some degree. It doesn't show up here in San Francisco, San Mateo County, very also high cost, part of the Silicon Valley. Currently in San Francisco, there are more dogs than there are children. So don't have a kid, get a poodle. That doesn't make much sense, but it seems to be what's happening. So where are kids going? They're going two places. Families are going two places: the Central Valley and the Inland Empire. So that's your constituency going forward. Next slide. Next slide. This one was done specifically for you. This actually just shows you also the darker the area, the less the child care capacity. And what you can see here, both statewide and certainly in your area, is that where the kids are moving is where there's less child care capacity, and where the legacy child care capacity is where there are fewer kids going forward. So your work is incredibly important. Next slide. Next slide. So I'm going to be doing next slide really quickly because I'm looking at the time here and I want to get to my stirring and emotional conclusion. So there's two phenomena I want to point out. There'll be a bunch we'll jump over because of the slides that remained. The first is that there's been also a tremendous increase in inequality in the United States. We now have a higher level of inequality, income going to the top 1%, than at any time since the Gilded Age of the robber barons. And actually, it's been on the uptick during the COVID era even more dramatically, but it's been on a long-term uptick since 1980. Beneath that, there's also been a real shift in wages and income for upper middle class people relative to working class and below that folks. That's what this shows, because it shows what's happening to wages at the 90th percentile, meaning 10% make more, 90% make less. The 80th, 20% make more, 80% make less. The orange bars are California. The blue bars are the Inland Empire. What you're going to notice about that is that, Just as California was America fast forward on demography, it's been America fast forward on inequality. So we're sort of unequal on steroids. And in the Inland Empire, you haven't seen much growth at the top, but you've seen a dramatic fall at the bottom. So people are moving here, but the wages are not healthy. The opportunities are not good. That is a challenge. So I want to take a moment to think a little bit about the aspect of this that's racial inequality. And what this chart does is look at median household income by race, white families, black families being headed by a black householder, Latino, AAPI, Native American. And what you can notice here is a story that's familiar to you, that yes, there's inequality by class, but there's also pretty sharp inequality by race. Because what I want to look at is the Inland Empire, before you're looking at LA. And what you're going to notice here is inequalities in household income. Two things about that. The second one will be a graph. The first is that we would like to think that all of that inequality is explained by just a difference in education, because that would make us feel good. But without going into the data here, there's still, once you control for education, very sharp differences in the wages that people get. Particularly for folks who are less than a high school education, an AA degree, etc. But even for college graduates, black folks face a severe wage penalty, Latinos as well. Asians only close the gap once they have a BA. Second, this is looking at all households. What I want to do right now is focus for just a minute, same chart, same axis, but I want to focus in on households raising children under the age of 5. Move the slide. Look what happens. The inequalities increase. So really what we're seeing is a system that is baking inequality in to the future. So what I want to conclude with, just by words and stories, is to ask you all to kind of try to keep a couple different things in mind. The first is that we are at a really fundamental turning point in our nation, in our state, in our regions, because we've got these phenomena we can see in the data with regard to where the children are, with regard to the pre-existing inequalities, with regard to where the need really is, and yet we are not waking up to address it. And for us to wake up to address it, we are going to need to, yes, bring this kind of data that's disaggregated, that makes the case, that gives people a sense of reliability. But we are also going to need to bring our hearts and souls and commitment to this work. Because it's not just a question of the data. It's a question of the commitment. It's a question of the values. It's a question of understanding that we have a shared future. And I want to end then with a story, which is my story. So I, like many of you, would start my story a generation earlier when my dad came to the country in the 1930s with papers that were imperfect. And when World War II came, he was given a choice between being deported or joining the US Army to fight in Europe. And he couldn't figure out what to do. This is true. And he gave a penny to my cousin Carlitos, who flipped it. That's how the decision was made. My dad, that penny, went to the war, came back safe. A generation later, his son is a full professor with an endowed chair at the University of Southern California. Which probably impresses no one in the room who's from UCLA, but still. And what I like to tell people is that's a great story, it's an American story, it's a California story, and it's the wrong story. It's the wrong story because when you tell it that way, it sounds like a family and their ganas, we say in Spanish, their desires, their hard work to get ahead. And I don't deny that my dad worked hard, that my mom worked hard, that I worked hard as well. But in the 1930s, when my dad had no papers, there was a union to defend his rights at work. And when he came back from the war, there was a GI Bill, which meant that he, a guy with a sixth grade education, could go to LA Trade Tech, a community college, and learn about electricity, and go from being a janitor to becoming an air conditioner repairman, industrial air conditioners, and the family could go from being poor, some of you know this, poor, where you open up the refrigerator and then just close it, go from being poor to being solidly working class. And with the GI Bill, he was able, with almost no money down, to buy a house in La Puente, inner ring suburb, and get their piece of the American dream. And we went to public schools because they were decent at the time, and you could get a great education. And when it came time to go to the university, there was affirmative action to take a chance on a kid like me that did not fit the typical profile. And that's the American story. That's the California story. It is a story, yes, of individuals working hard, having desires, wanting to achieve. And you know that your families have that already. But it's also a story of the public policies we put in place so that people can be successful. And yes, it is a story of the social movements that put those policies in place. So do the work.
Thank you, Dr. Pastor. I feel his presentation really captured the reasons why we are here today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Amanda Beckett with Child Care Resource Center. I am a part of our fabulous government relations team. I had the opportunity to work with our colleagues, or my colleagues, and the students of Cal State San Bernardino to put together this video for you called Finances in Family, the Burden of Care, Food, and Shelter. I enjoyed being a part of this because I was a young single mom at 19 and also struggled every single day. So I feel the students really highlighted the struggles our younger generations are going through. Thank you, and I hope you guys all enjoy.
Why do you think young people and families are struggling so much in today's economy?
I think young people are struggling a lot because childcare is really expensive. And if it wasn't, from my experience, if it wasn't for the programs here at CSUSB, I wouldn't have been able to come to school. And of course, I don't have a village to help me with my child, and so it makes a really huge difference that I can bring her here, and I also have I know that she's safe because she's here.
I think that there's been a really big change in the costs of things and the way that resources are made available that just doesn't keep up with how much it actually costs us.
Well, for starters, it just seems like in the last 4 years, everything has gone up in price. And then if you add things like children and childcare, it's just overwhelming. I was actually talking about this with my mom the other day. I'm a veteran, so I have a lot of resources and benefits that most of my peers don't. And honestly, I'm like, how do you do it? Because, I was able to buy a home, but I have the VA home loan, and they don't have that, and I just see them struggling. So, and I struggle.
We're seeing research that shows that a lot of younger people are not having kids because it's so expensive. I'm wondering what you think about that.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I had my son very young. I was 20 when I had him, and I'm definitely noticing a huge difference in what I can provide to him versus what I'd like to. So it makes a lot of sense.
So I agree with that. My wife and I actually had a discussion about that. And before my kid was born, we actually discussed about this before getting into it irrationally. So it is expensive because not only do you have appointments before they're born, it's after they're born as well with their constant visitations and stuff like that. And in terms of caring for them, maybe childcare, and maybe like, for instance, as a student parent, I'm a graduate student here. I have to consider maybe outside sources of who's going to take care of my kid while I'm away. So that's also a consideration.
I didn't have kids till I was 2 weeks till I turned 30. So my first child, I was 29. And that's definitely for a reason, financial.
How much do you think childcare costs, and how much do you think it should cost?
Childcare is expensive, and I understand.
No tengo idea. I have no idea.
I know they're like maybe like 3,000-4,000 for a month, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe it should be a little bit less. Maybe be a little bit easier on the parents because, I mean, we're taking care of our kids so they can be the next generation leading this country.
So for me, I get subsidized childcare, so I pay $1,300 a month. And then I think it should definitely cost a little less. I'm a student, I work full time, and I'm a parent. Because it just makes it a little bit more difficult to be able to make ends meet, maybe just less than rent these days.
Yeah. Do you think it was easier or more difficult to have a family in the previous generation compared to today?
It's difficult. I would say it's a lot different. Because my parents, I'm a family of 6, so I'm the oldest of my siblings, and we had it easier compared to now, where now as a parent, I see more of like, I have to make sure I have enough of my needs and our needs as a family met before we move on to stuff that we want to do. And that's never in consideration. It's always making those needs met first.
Yeah. What resources or policies do you think are needed to better support families?
I think for the most part it's childcare and maybe some extra help in terms of like food and stuff that can help with like my kid, for instance, in order to get a better development. Mostly childcare, I would say. Because for me, if it wasn't for my mother-in-law, for instance, she's the one that's been taking care of my kid. If it wasn't for her, I would have to be going for another job just for my kid to get childcare, just so I can attend here.
It's now my honor to introduce you to Senator Rosalicia Ochoa Bogue. I also want to give a shout out to her staff. Michael Glosser's here today, but her entire office, we do a lot of work with their office on local activities. They're a fantastic group of staff as well. Senator Bogue is a California native. She is the daughter of Mexican immigrants, and she credits her family teaching and personal responsibility. They gave her that responsibility and that value of it. The value of education, hard work, and home ownership is a cornerstone of kind of the American dream. And so she brings that into the work she does. Prior to being elected as our state senator in 2020, she was a teacher, real estate agent, school board member. She was president of the Yucaipa Valley Chamber of Commerce, as well as a board member for the East Valley Association of Realtors. Throughout her career, she's been a champion. Many of you have engaged with her here locally for things like stronger schools. She wants to see more affordable home prices, better infrastructure. She serves on various committees, 6 of them. 2 of them she is the vice chair of. That's education and housing. So we work with her a lot on education-related bills. No, I think there's 3. Human Services is also a committee she vice chairs. And then she's on the committee for government organizations, insurance, as well as ethics. So it's my honor to introduce you to Senator Rosalicia Ochoa Bogue.
Good morning, everyone. How are you folks doing today? Oh, I see some smiling faces. So I always have a smile on my face, even when people are yelling at me. I chuckle. It's my nervous reflex. I smile and I chuckle when people are, going at me, unless they're going after my children. Then I'm a mama bear. I'm a Latina mama bear, so you can imagine. But So it is with great pleasure that I'm here this morning, and I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Child Care Resource Center and all those devoted to enhancing the lives of families and children. Let me just begin really quickly. As mentioned earlier, I've been involved quite a bit in our communities in different capacities, always opening my eyes to the circumstances in which policy impact the personal lives of families. I am very traditional and conservative in the sense that, families to me are the most important unit in our communities, incredibly important. And as a state legislator, I'm really concerned about the well-being of our families in general, which is why I'm such an advocate for education, resources, and family. I sit on the budget, well, I was sitting on the budget committee up until 3 weeks ago, and Budget 1, education. Resources. And the stories that I heard from various spaces with regards to childcare was really concerning, considering the fact that we as a state do an audit to see how much people are making, and realizing that even with those findings, we don't automatically implement what is recommended. We actually have to pass it by statute through the legislature in order for these audits to be implemented. Did you folks know that? It was an eye-opening experience for me, because I thought, why are we doing audits, to assess how much people are making and not actually following through with it? It was an eye-opening experience for me. One of the silver linings of having so many committees is that I've had an opportunity to learn so much. And it actually has been quite a humbling experience to realize that the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. And that has been very humbling in Sacramento, because you are exposed to so much information across the state. And I'm a lifelong learner. How many of you folks are lifelong learners? Yeah, awesome. I'm a lifelong learner, and I can't memorize everything, I really can't. But I'd like to understand, and I want to understand what the issues are. And before I move into my talk, I just want to really quickly just plant a seed right now, because I'm in front of many, many leaders, community leaders right here. And I want us to start looking at policy a little different. I've held 39 town halls in my district in the past 20 months, because I understand that we have a lot of deficits in understanding how government works and understanding the power of one's voice in making a difference when it comes to legislation and permeating and promoting ideas in Sacramento. And so my goal has been to help people understand the government process, how legislation goes through the process, how it's advocated for, how you can really own your voice and engage with that. And so I kind of a different legislator than most. I don't vilify anyone. I actually want to talk and learn about how do we discuss ideas. Rather than vilifying people, we need to start discussing ideas. And I think you're going to see a little bit of that in my talk today. So, representing the Inland Empire in the Senate, the state Senate, has been an absolute privilege and an honor. Collaborating with community partners like CCRCs resonates deeply with my commitment to improving the well-being of California families. As a former teacher, school board member, and most significantly, a self-proclaimed Latina mama bear, and yes, do fear me if you come for my kids. The issues facing our children, our families, and our communities hold a very, very special and personal place in my heart. No issue is more critical than uplifting the lives of our community's youngest members and a vulnerable population too often voiceless in the broader political discourse. The gravity of the issues transcends party lines, reaching across the aisle with a common goal, ensuring that every child has the opportunity to grow in a nurturing environment that fosters their physical, emotional, and educational development. In my role as a state senator, I've been committed to representing the needs of my constituents irrespective of political parties. The commitment is especially pronounced when it comes to issues affecting our children. As a teacher and a mother, I understand the profound impact of the decisions that are made within our city halls, our county governments, and our state and nation's capitals. Our approach to policy must reflect the interconnected nature of children's well-being with various facets of society, including education, healthcare, social service, and economic policies. To truly address the complex challenges of our youth and families face, we must break down the silos. We must foster collaboration and create integrated, multifaceted strategies. Siloed approaches only lead to fragmented efforts, hindering the holistic support that children need and deserve. And here I'm just going to interject the importance of learning how to have dialogue, how to discuss ideas, and learning that there are ideas that you may disagree with and not necessarily the person. We must start healing our communities, and it begins with our families, and yes, it begins with our leaders. And I share that because I'm a huge advocate and protector of the First Amendment. But with that, as leaders, in the different capacities that we serve, whether elected or not elected, we must start modeling what we want to see in governance and in leadership. And it means that we take responsibility for the words that we use and how we say them, and the tone. As we engage in today's discussions, it is my hope that our collective commitment to working together, leveraging our assets, and maximizing services to our communities will become the norm rather than the exception. By breaking down silos and fostering collaboration, we can ensure a more coordinated, impactful response to the diverse needs of our youth, building a brighter future for our children, families, and communities. But it starts with leadership that helps unify and helps heal and facilitate conversation. And most important, model grace in all that we do and kindness. Would you agree? Thank you very much for our shared dedication to inspire positive change in the lives of those we serve. It is my commitment. It is my commitment as a state senator to continue on the work and the path that we've been doing with the amazing team that I have. All that work with me come with a sense and a heart of service, absolute service to the community people that we serve to our constituents. There's one last point that I would like to make in the fact that we talk about the cost of living in the state of California. And as someone who understands the impact of policy on the cost of living, we must start looking at that cost because our families are struggling. And we need to start looking at policy a little different. This is what I wanted to talk about a little earlier. But when we talk about policy, when we talk about legislation and the ideas of the problems that we're trying to fix, I want us to set, and this I'm going to leave with this, I want us to start looking at policy or legislation a little differently. I want us to start asking what it is that we're trying to fix. What is the issue and the problem that we're trying to fix? And I want you to peel that onion and look at what is the cost of that, the root problem of that's causing that issue that we're trying to solve. And I want you to go even further and peel the onion a little bit further and ask yourself what is causing that particular issue. And I want you to peel the onion as far back as you can to understand what it is that we're truly, truly trying to fix, and whether that legislation is actually going to address that issue or not. Because we're passing a lot of laws every single year, raising the cost of living every single year, and making it very difficult for our families to raise their children. We have to rethink what we're doing and how we view policy, how we digest it, and how do we come up with the solutions. And it has to start with thinking differently about what we're trying to solve. Because we have 40 senators with the potential of passing 80 bills in 4 years. Do the math. 80 assembly members, 2 years in office with 50 bills they can pass. Do the math. We're passing a lot of bills, a lot of legislation, and yet our families are struggling. Are we doing it right, or do we need to start thinking differently? I believe we need to start thinking differently, stop working in silos, and coming together for the betterment and the healing and the success of every single family in California. Thank you for your time.
Well, you've heard from big picture, you've heard from state people, and now we're going to talk about local leaders. So I'm going to ask my panelists to come on stage first, and then I will introduce you. Starting on the lady in the red suit first. You probably all know Karen Scott, who's been the director of First 5 San Bernardino. And I'm looking for everybody's bio, but I would say that Karen is one of the great champions in San Bernardino for young children, and has been a wonderful partner for all of us for quite a long time. And we have, okay, I'm already not following the script. Okay, next we have Sharna Whitby, who is the Deputy Director for Programs, First 5 Riverside. Is pinch hitting for the director, who couldn't make it because she got sick. And the most important thing about Sharna is that she was my son's boss for 5 or 6 years in Los Angeles. And when you talk about kids not having kids, I got 3 of them in their 30s, and not one grandkid. So there you go. Okay, next I have, let's see, I have Carrie Huntman. Okay. And she is the director of the San Bernardino County.
Okay, Trevor Harmon, Director of San Bernardino County Community Development and Housing Department, and provides operations oversight for both community development and housing and homeless services. She's had 20 years of experience in affordable housing and community development, and began her career as an AmeriCorps homeless outreach worker at the Yale Loma Linda. Jennifer Goldgreen, Paul was named Stream Director at Ella's. She was on one last year. And she's the Director of Learning Systems and to San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. She's currently 25 years of educational experience in the pre-K system, and she provides leadership oversight, including the development of technical assistance services, educational leadership capacity, and whole child initiatives. She's especially conversant in the whole community schools piece. And then Barbara Andrade Dubrinsky, another person who used to be in LA, who's now in Riverside, and she's the Deputy Director of Service Integration, which within the county's Chief Executive Office of First 5 Riverside. They're responsible for the development and scaling up of the county's integrated service delivery system, known as Rovco One. Okay, so those introductions, and I cut them down because we were a little bit late in time, and that gave me enough questions to ask for the next 2 or 3 days. But let me start by asking you all, you heard what Dr. Pastor talked about, And thinking towards the future, since you're the people on the ground that are going to have to get this done, what are the key changes or developments in policies or services you'd like to see to ensure a better outcome for children and families affected by poverty, both in the Inland Empire and in the state? So I'll just start with Karen, and we'll just go right down the line, if that's okay.
Changes that. Yep. Wow, just mix it all up, everything that I heard today. Changes that support us really being able to hear the voices of our parents, of our families. Assembly member Reyes, bring back So There Ought to Be a Law.
We all know that disparities begin before birth. And my favorite policies always begin with presumptive eligibility and automatic continuous supports for those precious early years and that tender transition time from prenatal to birth, so that families don't develop more of a deficit and are supported universally near this.
So for me, I really want to centralize housing as key to stability for families and very young children. We're facing tough budgets, right, at the federal and state level, but we need to double down on our housing investments, and we all need to kind of carry that flag that we need to have affordable housing. And we also need to realize that preventing somebody from becoming homeless is just as critical as helping a family that is already homeless. So expanding eligibility to folks that are on the verge is also very important in policy interventions.
From our perspective in education, we're happy to have legislative policy that supports the needs of the whole child, but continuing to identify legislative opportunities that build that opportunity for cross-sector alignment of that legislative policy, truly from cradle to classroom through career, so that we have the opportunity to look at educational legislation through the lens of health, safety, workforce, and education, and work together on shared outcomes, as was shared, that really gets down to the root cause and the inequities and the opportunities that are present in each community that we serve together.
I think we really need policy that doesn't force our families to knock on the door of many, many silos and have to make sense of what happens when they knock on that door of that silo. I think our policies reflect a fear, a deep fear that somebody's going to get something they don't deserve. And we know that's not really our biggest challenge.
You have to wait for the light to turn green. Okay, so we have all this population growth in the Inland Empire. And how are you planning to plan? How are you going to plan for the growth that's happening and the in-migration and all that? What kind of steps are you going to take?
My organization, I think one of the steps is collaboration, is understanding the data. We've talked a lot about having forums where we can evaluate the data and really look at what does the data tell us, and then listen to what our families need and what our communities need. So I know we hear the word collaboration a lot, but I really think that that is the key to be able to leverage our resources and be inclusive of all the opportunities to improve.
In Riverside County, and I know Barb can speak to this more, our extreme focus on integration between departments means that we are proactively concentrating and focusing on connecting services and systems, closing loops for referrals, making sure it's not just a linkage, but that services are actually received and that we are following up that way. I'm just gonna stand up in person. And that we are working together, it's not just more for families. We don't need more interventions and more services all the time, but that we are thoughtfully handing off between silos, between departments, integrating workflows, not just co-locations.
I think from the housing perspective, we're already short 55,000 affordable housing units in San Bernardino County, and probably a similar number in Riverside County. So we need to build, 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 and we need to build housing at all income levels. We need to ensure that we continue to have home ownership opportunities within the Inland Empire. That's why people come here and continue to come here. And we also need to ensure that as we're integrating services, that assessing families' housing and rent burden is central to how we're assessing the needs of that family. Because how we introduce ourselves is usually telling people our name, where we work, but also where we live, and the opportunities that children have are driven by where they live in the immediate community surrounding their house.
As a champion for the California Community Schools Initiative, I think we have a unique opportunity to leverage that legislation and to work to be the hub of the community and leverage schools so that, as it was shared earlier, there's one door to what students, families, and children and communities needs. And that one door as school, as education, opens all of the other doors that have been mentioned here today so that families and mothers and new people moving into our areas don't have to figure out where to find what they need. But we know at some point all roads come to education, and we're happy to use that platform to connect with housing sector, with health, with safety, with finance, with anyone who's going to help to improve the state, not only of education, but of the students and families to be served through that. And so I think there's a great opportunity on the horizon to be able to look at how does that live and breathe differently in each of the communities and with each of the partners that we engage with together.
In order to integrate the resources that our families have available to them, we have to understand that, well, we do kind of understand the interdependency, right? We know that we're giving somebody financial assistance. We know that it's impacted by the relationships in their household. Maybe we helped here, but they're caring for an older person in the household, and that's really affecting how much the service we're providing is going to be able to resolve those challenges. So we know that sort of philosophically, but our operations don't reflect that. We say, I have a mandate, or I'm executing an enforced, a mandated service or an entitlement. We're driven by the state to execute entitlements very rapidly. So the idea of establishing a broader understanding of the need of that household flies in the face of the expectation of the state. So we know those interdependencies exist, but how do we create this space and reorganize our workforce to take the time to get the holistic needs up front? So when they walk into that first door, it is the right door for everything that's available to them from county government and certainly their community as well. And that takes everybody looking very hard and close at their operation and making dramatic shifts. And we all know we have resource issues too. We know that we don't have the workforce we need just to do those siloed operations. So that creates another layer of stress on our ability to shift. So I think in Riverside, we say if we could do it right with one person, then we could do it right with 5 people, and then we could do it right with 10 people. But they have to feel, all of those silos have to feel the benefit to themselves in order to make it work. They have to feel, oh yeah, I'm taking more time with this customer, but I'm benefiting from the fact that my partner in another department is taking more time with the customer. They're going to refer to me. They're doing part of the work before it gets to me. And so these are the sort of like operational steps to it. And it is a dramatic shift. And we are driven by the state to function very differently. We brought into this work a grant for serving our unhoused population that is also has a disability. And when we talk to the state about we're devising this system that we expect to work for everybody, including the unhoused population, they accepted our proposal, they gave us the grant, they said, we need you to revise it because we need to know it's only benefiting the unhoused disabled population. So you want us to make a siloed system for them, that's not to their benefit. Forget the other populations, but it's not to their benefit because we're not going to get everything we need to them if we do that. And this is what we experience in many competitive grants that county government can get from the states.
So keep the microphone there for a second. So let's follow up on the whole business about, you can have all these great plans, but you have to have a workforce. And you started to talk about that. So I think let's go this way and just talk about, so how do we find, retain a skilled workforce? Jennifer talked about it a little bit, but we're all struggling with finding good people.
And, you know, we're having trouble with teachers, we're having trouble with preschool, I mean, the whole, what kind of ideas do you have to start to build that up?
I'm sure many people will talk about the compensation packages that are needed to improve. I won't word it out, I'm sure many people can speak to it, but one thing we've noticed in this work is the job satisfaction. Those staff on the ground that are now working with customers in a very different way than they did before, where they say, oh, you can't speak to utility assistance, here's your utility system. We say, no, you're going to slow down, you're going to provide this engagement, but we actually have something that sort of coalesces our visions. It's called a whole person health score. This is a universal assessment applied, and then a discussion about what do you and your household really need in total. And what we find is the job satisfaction of the staff goes up dramatically, because I mean, we all know this. It feels good to do work right by people. It feels good to feel like you've had an impact, a positive impact in somebody's lives. And they not only want to do the work, they want to bring their colleagues into the work. They want their peers to be able to do the same thing they're doing. So I do think, you know, it's not the whole answer. We need the compensation packages. We need people to be well compensated, because even if they have job satisfaction, they also have to take care of their own family. And we really shouldn't have people who are taking care of other people not be able to do the same for their own family.
We saw some interesting demographic data shared earlier for our county, and I think it really gives us the call to action for workforce to work together to create an opportunity where our citizens want to live, work, stay, and play. And that's no easy charge. In the education sector, that means that we are creating a workforce from classroom to career and back to classroom. That is no easy charge, especially if we look at some of the challenges that we face across other sectors. And so I think the call to action as we innovate and we're responsive in the multi-generations that are coming into this region is looking at our workforce through the same lens of that generational shift. We are not preparing the same workforce that we once were. There are 4 generations present in my current workforce right now. I have hired 9 of them in the last 6 months, and that's on me as a leader to look at my recruitment and my retainment strategies of this new workforce and say, how do I lead, recruit, and retain a diverse workforce, regardless of what my sector is, because it certainly isn't the same workforce that we were cultivating 3 or 4 generations ago. So as we look particularly at the education sector, are we looking at opportunities to leverage innovative staffing models? Are we looking at mixed delivery models where it levels the playing field between those who are certificated and those who are credentialed? Are we looking at incentive packages that were previously mentioned? Are we looking at teacher residency programs, work-based learning programs, all of those things that bring our educators into the career that is valued most, but then also gives them the reward of the value that they passed on to our children? And not in a way that sacrifices the value of being a working mother at the same time, or having to take care of elderly parents at the same time. But we put value where we see value, and we grow value where it needs to be most, and that's with our children. Just again,
Did you get my microphone?
I did. Maybe it's back. So from a housing perspective, you're going to need to earn just over $35 an hour to afford the bottom of the barrel of a 2-bedroom apartment. So we have to keep that number in mind, because many of our workforce that are on the very front lines of human services do not start at that $35, an hour. Our nonprofits are incredibly critical to the work we're doing. And, cost of living increases are not often built into state and federal grants, even some of our local grants. So we need to be cognizant, those of us who are on the government side, of ensuring that our nonprofits and those that work in our nonprofits are well resourced. And as a former AmeriCorps member, and that's how I stumbled into my, now 2-decade-long career in housing, AmeriCorps was an amazing way for me to get in the door, but let's reimagine AmeriCorps to bring in the workforce in human services and early childhood education. And the other final comment I'll make as a former workforce director, and to the comments that were made by my colleagues,
ahead of me is we need to re-envision our workforce and how we promote and how we encourage folks, right? So it might be okay for somebody to go to a four-year university or, you know, a community college on our dime during the workday. Yes. If we know that person is going to come back, and that's how we up educational attainment and keep people engaged in our work. And so we need to be creative, and we also need to be passionate in building up our workforce.
First Life Riverside operates a number of family resource centers. We are training our staff on the whole person health score and across the county PC9 universe intakes so that not only are we identifying the needs in that moment and sharing with our partners, but over time, we are seeing improvements in the whole person health score. We are staying in relationship with the individuals and also seeing improvements over population outcomes over time, which is incredibly helpful for stability of the workforce, breaking down the silos and sharing and cross-training across departments and helps with stability in our workforce. But in our early learning work, I would say it's wages and wages only. We've been investing in wage enhancements while we wait for rate reform, and we aren't going to stop because that's the only thing that really is driving stability for us. And also,
I think almost everything is said, but when I think about workforce, I think about the fact that our country was built on faith-based and our nonprofit, our community-based organizations. There is a workforce among those entities, and we need to support them so they can continue to do the work. A lot of it is based on their values and relationships, and it's very powerful what they can do to support our children and families. And I think that that's the focus for what.
So here's a question that wasn't on any of the sheets, but it occurred to me. Senator Bogue talked about we need to have policies that are different. We need to look at integrating services. So what do you think we need to do to make that happen? You've got some of the more passionate legislators in both San Bernardino and in Riverside. I met with Corey Jackson a couple of weeks ago, and he wants to, he's a Riverside Assembly member. He wants to change the way the human services are done. So how do we move from everybody being in their silo to being able to advocate for integrated services? I don't have an answer, so I'm asking you. I'm hoping that maybe one of you does. So, Karen, you want to start?
Things like this, it's opportunities like this where we get a chance to talk with one another, share other ideas. That's the most basic thing.
I think key to all of that is sharing data. In Riverside, the more we share health information across departments in a responsible way, the more we're able to share outcomes and share impact in a way that breaks down the silos and also re-envisions how we are willing to provide services. And again, another plug for something about eligibility threshold versus.
Yes.
I would say ARPA has shown us that flexible funding really works. And it really works when you give it to the local level. County levels, city levels, we have good ideas. We know what's going on in our community. We do work together, and we don't need to over-regulate funding at the federal and state level and then push those regulations down. We're able to work together and come up with some very creative programming and put the money to use immediately in our areas of greatest need. And another plug would be, we need to find our common voices, the Inland Empire, and a shared legislative agenda. We, oftentimes we're working in legislative silos, but we very much believe in the same things: good schools, good housing, safe communities to live in, and good economic opportunities. And I think we should just find our common voice.
Yes.
I agree. There's so much that was shared, especially around coming together with like-minded people, with people who have the power and the impact together to really unify, similar to what we've heard today, a shared vision for change, particularly for our youngest learners and children and families. But I think more than that, I think we need to challenge ourselves past the convening. I think we need to operationalize the ideas that are shared. We need to move past breakfast into the parking lot, and we need to mobilize our shared efforts together to create joint legislation, to identify mutual strategies that have reinforcing goals across many of our cross-sector systems, to come together and say this is something that we can unify all of our shared efforts, resources, advocacy, and partners, and really truly make a difference past the moment, past the convening, and really work together to say, how do you see the system? We can talk about transforming the system, but how do you see success? How do you measure success? And how do you mobilize success together? That would be our challenge.
I still have a lot of hope for CalAIM and potential expansion of principles of CalAIM to a broader population. So as we talk about customers having no wrong door, we want that to be the case, but we kind of know naturally that healthcare is sort of a really friendly first door. What I mean by that is, and I can say this as a social worker, there's a lot of shame in our society around tapping into social services that cause deserving, eligible people not to take advantage of them. But they go with the doctor. And under CalAIM, we have this opportunity for the focus on social determinants of health for our medical colleagues to say, we are encouraging you to take advantage of these social and safety opportunities. And that creates also an umbrella to connect our data sets together to better serve, to analyze how to better distribute our resources and meet the needs, get those people into those pathways. So I do have hope. Right now, I think CalAIM focuses on just sort of too small of a population, very in need of those extra support, but it kind of doesn't allow us to do that on a preventative level. And if we take those principles and expand them, we can all be under that umbrella together, serving those families collectively.
So I have to share with you a story, Carrie, in particular about the ARPA money, and flexibility or non-flexibility. And I think something that Barb said about the rules being so tight from the state often. So the city of Los Angeles approached us during ARPA and wanted to spend some childcare money. And we said, fine, it wasn't a lot of money, $6 million divided up by 6 of our agencies. And in order to do that, they wanted us to give them each sign-in sheet for each child that we were paying for, and to make copies of that to send to them. And we said, we don't do that with any of our other programs. We have them on file, and if you want to audit us, you come out and you audit us. But for us to make copies of this is going to cost as much as the money that you're giving us, and we don't really want to do that. And say, but this is the way that we do our business, and we have to be prepared because the federal government comes out and audits us. And so, I bet you all have stories like this that you could tell. I mean, whether you're in the schools or whether you're in the whatever sector you're in, that it's the accountability that goes way over the top. I mean, I saw Diane Alexander before, and we were talking about, there she is, we were talking about Head Start. And Head Start has more requirements and more accountability than you can possibly imagine. And you spend all your time trying to do all this accountability stuff as opposed to providing services to kids. So that was my preach, okay? So that's one of my board members. So I wonder if you want to, we put these barriers in there, and Bob's right, it's about, we don't trust people, and so how do we overcome that? Because how do you retain staff if everybody is out there not trusting people? And our families, whether they're rich or they're poor, want to take care of their kids. And we make it so difficult for them to do that. So any ideas? I'm just throwing this out. It just sort of, when you said that, it made me think of this painful story. So I don't know if you have any reactions. So.
Right part I'm sure that was PTSD from the federal regulations. Our state regulations only just mimic it, but I think we become very risk averse.
Yes.
Right, and it's just all our, the health, human services, right? We're so afraid of this audit law
As in my 25 years, while they might have scolded me, they've never outscored of like money that had already been spent. That. And so I think we need to get on our own heads.
Yes.
I really think we also need to examine some of our successes, and this is where, you know, everyone in this field is really critical. Somewhere along the line, I think not the decade of the brain, the 90s, right? And we acknowledged the humanity of small children. What I mean by that is we recognize that their cognitive functioning, their physical health, their social and emotional health are all connected, which is, to me, acknowledging that he was human. And then we've also, in the recent decades, recognized, and you know, to Dr. Pastor's presentation, we have this growing senior population, and we recognize, oh, they're also vulnerable, and in order to address one aspect of their life, you need to address all aspects of their life. And there's all the people in the middle, including the parents of these children, who somehow we say, once you're in that stage of life, our policies say, you are not to be trusted to some extent, and we are not expected to help you figure out how to live holistically, support you being able to live holistically. So the policies that come down from the state and how we spend our funds and how we do work reflects that. So if we look at our success and say, look what it did for small children, we have these amazing generations. The kids at the decade of the brain are so smart, so capable, so, you know, they've gone through a lot recently, but emotionally stable. They are benefiting our society because we recognize their holistic, their humanity, their holistic humanity. And we know we to some extent in our policy, not as much as we should, honor that in our senior population. So do we not recognize that if we did that with all age groups, we would have that greater success? So I think this field, the early childhood field, is a success story we need to expand on.
Science, thank you, as you have said. In education, we are masters, again, in our own way, and masters of documentation and paperwork. I think it goes with the continuum. So I appreciate the call to action because there is technical work to be done in improving lives, right? There are technical strategies. There's accountability to funding. There's compliance with legislation. There is a technical edge to what we do. But just like you shared, there's a humanization as well. This is human-centered work. And so being courageous in our ability to sometimes set the technical aside and focus on the transformational, to take a courageous step forward. Like I work with my colleagues and my leaders and my staff and say, no one's gonna blame you for taking the wrong step forward. They may blame you for not taking a step forward, right? And I think sometimes we need to hold each other accountable to that, to say, I'll step with you. They can't get us all at the same time, right? But we have to move forward. We have to move forward because our children, our families need us to set aside the race, the gender, the zip codes, and take a step forward together. And that step may not transition to a box I can check on the piece of paper in front of me, and that's okay because again, it's humanizing work. At some point, it will get on the paper. It will get there. Documentation will be found. Policies will be followed. But sometimes I do think that it just takes some of us saying, you know what, I'll grab your hand, let's step off the playground into the parking lot, and let's do something. Let's do something amazing together. And the impact will show where the accountability and the documentation sometimes does not. And that's true transformation, right? So, thank you.
First, like Riverside, we are thinking deeply about this issue of SDR funding, the idea of a public agency, and thinking about the data quality issues that we have, the burden with on our contractors towards us, because we want to own the outcomes, and also we know it's not just one intervention if we use over all of our story and population, right? Like that is not ours to segment that way. And also thinking deeply about our investments, that trusting families to do the right thing, and also trusting families that they want to provide the safe, stable, nurturing relationships. Sometimes the answer is just basic needs. Guaranteed basic income is a solution and a trust issue that we need to figure out and expand because we know it works. Yeah.
I would say at first, like Senator, one of the things, we look at the successes of some of our initiatives, we look at data, we listen to parents, and we just recently released $1 million best proposals for our family support initiative. And it was looking to be innovative. We were trying to be less restrictive. We don't necessarily know exactly what our organizations that are out there serving families, they know what they need to do, and what they need to be able to support them in the family. So that's one way to try to get out of it. The other thing is just kind of a story that I heard yesterday, and kind of goes to how us in the risk takers worry about certain decisions that we make. This is someone at Housing Development said this particular development, they gave each family, each resident a bicycle. That sounds like it's like where did they sell one? Well, if they sold the one, that still would be beneficial to them. And so there is no loss, in that rate. That's all.
Great. Well, we've kind of come to the end of our time. I want to, all we need is another couple of hundred people. Actually, we have about 100 people here. So everybody raise their right hand and say, I'm going to do better. On it. There we go. So I want to thank you all. We solved the problems of affordable housing, childcare, access to employment, and we just need now to go out there and get it done. So thank you all very much.
Okay, I think I got the one that works. Well, thank again our amazing panel of local experts. You're all in such good hands here in the Inland Empire. I'm Donna Snaringer. I'm the Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at CCRC, and we are so thrilled to partner with folks in both San Bernardino and Riverside County to bring you the program here today. I have the pleasure of closing the event, which means I stand between you and the door, which I understand is not an enviable place. But I did want to take one more opportunity to thank my team who put this work together. They're sprinkled throughout the room. They were here yesterday. This takes a lot of work. This has been a multiple-month process, and I could not do what I do without all of them. I also want to talk to you a little bit about your centerpieces. Sometimes we give centerpieces away, but we're not giving these away today. They are actually examples to all of you of the amazing resources that we are able to provide to families in our community through partnership and donation. And we know that families need the very basic things, and sometimes a blanket, a soft toy, a packet of diapers and wipes is the beginning of a conversation. And I know one of our speakers talked about, really starting where people are and with what they need. So we really do appreciate all of the partnership that allows us to do that. You are getting to take home one of these. So we are very fortunate to partner with PBS Kids, and Brianna Marquez on our team has done all of the amazing work with them. And she gave me a long list of things to tell you, but I know I stand between you and the door. But Daniel Tiger is in your box. And some toothbrushes. And if you have a baby in your life or a little one in your life, please take it and share that with them. And thank you, Brianna, for making sure I remembered to do that. So I did want to just go back to all of the amazing information that was shared and what we've learned here today. I really appreciate the idea that California is America on fast forward, for good and for bad. And I think we have a lot to learn, and we have a lot to teach the rest of the country about what we've done right and what we haven't. And there's so much more that can be done to make our society more equitable. I really am appreciative of all the information that was shared about breaking down silos and really meeting families where they are with what they need. And bureaucracy is tough. I mean, all of us who administer multiple state contracts, work with different government agencies, or live in those government agencies, I think we have a lot of work to do to really trust our families and hear what they're telling us and bring them the support and services that they need. And we need to stop assuming the worst. I've worked in childcare and in social services my whole adult life. There's been so much energy and money spent on enforcement. And that's not what we're supposed to be doing. So whatever we can do to tell the story that families really want what's best, our job is to help them get there. So we need to all work on that. And then the idea of one door, so wherever a family arrives, and I really appreciated the idea around community schools and schools being a place where families already go. But for our littles, it's often childcare. And we need to have a similar approach, similar to what Head Start already does, to provide support and services to our youngest children and their families as well. So I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, today is International Women's Day. And I feel like the luckiest person in the world that I get to come to work every day with some phenomenal women. And women who are fighting for our communities and to make the world a better place, and a lot of men who support them in doing that work as well. So I'm just going to leave you and take a minute today to think about the women in your life, the women you work with, the women who raised you, and give them a little extra love today. And just leave you with this thought. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, and may we raise them. And I just appreciate you all today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of Friday. It's a beautiful day out, and happy weekend.